My name is Allison Carter. Today I'm going to be giving a talk entitled Fluxus to Functional, Journey Through Interactive Art. And so kind of today what we're going to look at is we're going to look at a few interactive art pieces, some done in Lisp and Clojure, and sort of look at how they relate to kind of the art movement and where they came from. And so we're doing a journey through interactive art. Though I kind of think this talk should be titled, What Do Urinals and Overtone Have in Common? And hopefully this makes sense in a little bit. We'll see. But first off, let's kind of look at what is art. This isn't a great question, but it's kind of something that we sort of have to look at whenever we're talking about any sort of new idea of what can be art or what art used to be. Because really, art is always changing. Art didn't have to originally make sense. Art used to have to be religious. Art kind of changed from, how we looked at things. And at times, art had to be European, and art now could be American. And art used to have to sort of show a scene or a picture, and then art could show an emotion. And art didn't even have to be something that was created. It could be something that already existed. One of my favorite quotes about art is from Marshall McLuhan, who is a media theorist and cultural theorist of the 60s. And it's basically, art is anything you can get away with. And I've always loved this quote because I think it's entirely true. So let's take a look at this. Is this art? This is something that wasn't in a museum. It was actually in the Museum of British Columbia in Vancouver. And it looks like art. It looks like something that could be art that someone painted. As does this. I mean, it's definitely abstract. It's definitely abstract expressionism. Maybe it has an intent behind it, we think. But what if this wasn't painted by someone? What if this was painted by Aaron? Aaron is actually a piece of software, and Aaron is a painter. Aaron has been in continuous development since the 70s and is currently a Lisp project that creates paintings and abstract paintings, still life, portraits based on sort of commands and things that the creator, Harold Cohen, puts in. Aaron has had several iterations. Currently, Aaron is this right here, which is a physical machine that actually paints paint onto canvas and creates these works. But Aaron has also been a Windows screensaver in the 90s, because of course he was. But this kind of brings up a question. And art itself is creative, but is Aaron creative? Aaron doesn't have a creative process. I would say Aaron is not creative, but Aaron is instead interactive. Takes in commands and creates these pieces of art. And here is a quote from Harold Cohen, the creator of Aaron. Basically says, if what Aaron is making is not art, what is it exactly? And in what ways, other than its origin, does it differ from the real thing? If it is not thinking, what exactly is it doing? This brings up some really good points about what art can be. And it kind of brings us to ask these questions. Again, not great, but what is art? I like to think of art being as the merit of the piece is intrinsically tied to the way in which it was created. And this kind of brings us back to Marshall McLuhan. He said something in a book, Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man and Self, that the medium is the message. He would later write another book that was entitled The Medium of the Message and sort of go more in depth with these ideas. But this is where a lot of foundations of media studies and looking at interactive art and today's media kind of come from. So Marshall McLuhan talked about this idea of the light bulb as a piece of, or as an important piece of art. Not because it's something that's created, but it's because it's something that allows creation. This is something that he coined a term, a medium without content. There is no content to the light bulb. The light bulb exists as a light bulb, but as he put it, what it does is it creates an environment by its mere presence. And the light enables art to be created. It enables us to do many things. I mean, when the light bulb was created, we were able to work at night. It allowed all of these other things to happen. And so this medium of the light bulb is extremely important to our society. Another thing he talked about was the printing press. And the printing press sort of allowed us to take knowledge away from the keepers and holders of it. Because if we think about it, before the printing press was created, works of literature and works of knowledge were all sort of held by churches and schools and sort of those that wanted to keep this information away from everyone. But the printing press allowed this to be printed everywhere. And in some ways, this is more important than any individual piece or any individual book that was printed on the printing press. The same way a blank canvas is just as important as a piece of art that is going onto it. And all of these different mediums allow us to look at things in different ways. I mean, we looked at music in a certain way, and then we had the advent of electronic music and synthesizers and all of these things. So as these new mediums come into play, we sort of see people using them in different ways and creating art in different ways. So let's take a moment and watch something. This is a performance piece by a group called REPL Electric, and they are a Clojure live performance group that uses overtone and shader tone and shader toys and things like that to create these sort of intermedia pieces. So watch this for a little bit and sort of see how it evolves and how it changes. So kind of what we're watching here is not one individual thing. It's a bunch of different things happening. It's video art. I mean, there is a video component. We're watching the video sort of be created and expand. There's an auditory component. We're watching music, and we're listening to the music being created. But this is also something that's being performed. This particular video is entitled Stars, and it was a live performance in front of an audience. So this is being live coded, and the act of coding is in itself a performance here. But in the same vein, this is also interactive art. This is art that is being interacted with, and it's changing as the code is being written. I mean, I think this is pretty cool, and I'm into it. I'm into the music that's happening. I'm into the visuals, and it's something that's new, and it's something that we're kind of playing with. We're playing with this medium, and we're playing with Clojure as a medium. But this is part of a much larger art movement and kind of a long tradition. And I think to sort of see why this is something that's important and sort of where it's coming from, we kind of have to take a step back. And we kind of have to look at things that were happening before. So, yeah. Marcel Duchamp was an artist in the 1920s, and he had this great quote that is, "Art is not about itself, but the attention we bring to it." And this was sort of the foundation of this art movement that was called Dada. And Dada was this art movement from the 1920s. It was a bunch of people who were kind of a little upset at where art was going. We had these museums, we had these pieces. They were like, well, we make stuff. We don't make stuff like that, but our stuff's important. And it was this revolutionary movement. And they had this idea that, they could have these things called ready-mades. Ready-mades were basically what we saw earlier with the fountain, the urinal. It's this object in the world that if you put intent behind it, it now becomes art. And that piece of art is basically in museums all over the world, but it's all recreated. This art is not so much the individual piece, it's kind of a set of instructions. It's like, if you want to make a fountain, what you do is you get a urinal, you take it apart, you sign your name, or you sign Marcel Duchamp's name since he came up with the piece, and you put it on a podium, and now you have a piece of art. And all of these pieces that you're making are still important, but it's this idea of recreation, and this idea of anything can be art without intent. One of my favorite Dada pieces is Marcel Duchamp's door in his apartment, which he made into Door 11 Roulerie from 1927. And it's playing with this idea of a door can either be open or closed. And this door can never be opened or closed. It's always both. That's kind of the heart of Dada, is this little bit of fun and kind of just, sort of saying, we'll do whatever we want. But what was going on at the same time was this idea of film, and film was sort of taking off. And it was the 1920s. We kind of had Hollywood, we had silent film, we had all these people looking at stories and images and things like that. And the Dada folks decided that they weren't going to use a film camera in a traditional way. They weren't going to use it to capture a story. They were going to do something a little bit different. So this is an avant-garde piece called The Return to Reason. We're going to watch a little bit of it. We don't have to watch all of it, but So what we just watched was a little out there, and it's avant-garde cinema. But what they're doing is they're trying something new, and they're using the camera in a different way. They're throwing nails in front of it. They're just looking at how light moves, and they're kind of using this new medium and sort of playing with it as a toy. But it's also looking at this is something that's recreated. I mean, the film we just watched is as important as a film we could watch anywhere else. We can watch the same one everywhere, and it's all return to reason. It's all this idea. And Walter Benjamin was an author, philosopher, cultural critic, one of the founders of sort of media studies, aesthetic theory, things like that. He wrote a book called The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. Basically, he said, in this quote, even the most perfect reproduction of a work of art is lacking one element, the existence and place where it happens to be. So where the piece of art was created is what makes it important. Where this video was created and how it was created and who created it and the intent behind it is what's important. So we can have this recreation all through this. And so that was sort of Dada, and that kind of brings us to the next idea, which is this movement called Fluxus. And Fluxus was this movement in the 60s and 70s, and this art movement that was another revolutionary art movement that was sort of challenging what it means to be art and what it means to make art. It was sort of a response to a predominantly rich and white and male-dominated industry of the art world, and saying that the creation of art was more important than the final piece. I mean, they were really serious. They even had a manifesto, so obviously they knew what they were doing. But let's take a look. This is a recreation of a Fluxus piece, which we can only watch a brief moment of. But, oh, sorry, slide ahead. But anyway, before we get to that, let's just go over Fluxus has mainly 4 tenets when you're looking at it. I like to look at it as Fluxus is an attitude. Fluxus is less about what you're doing and more about the attitude you have approaching it. Fluxus is also intermedia. And I'm sure most of you have heard the term multimedia. Intermedia is similar. I would say sort of the difference is multimedia can be a bunch of different things together. You could have music and a movie and a presentation. Like this is a multimedia presentation. But if I didn't show videos, it would still be a presentation. Sort of what we looked at with REPL Electric earlier, I would say is an intermedia piece. Because if you take one of those pieces out, you no longer have what's important about it. You don't have the mix of video, audio, and performance. Without one of those individual pieces, it ceases to be as important. And that's sort of where intermedia comes from. I'd also say Fluxus is simple. It sort of looks at a simple idea and sort of it expands upon it. And most importantly, it has fun. Looking at sort of this kind of art movement, it's easy to look at a lot of these things and say like, oh, that's silly, that's pretentious, I don't really get it. But really, I mean, I like to just look at it as a lot of people having fun, which is basically what we're all doing now anyway. This is a piece that's called Painting to Hammer and Nail. Basically what you do is, it's a canvas and you have hammers and nails and you nail a nail into the canvas, and that's it. It's interactive. This is by an artist I'm sure most of you actually know, who is Yoko Ono, who you probably don't know as so much as an artist, but more as John Lennon's wife. But she was really important in contemporary art. But Fluxus also sort of looked at using things in different ways, much like hammering a piano shut instead of playing it. And this is mainly just something simple, something fun, something new, and doing something a little weird. But Fluxus is weird, it's out there, and yeah, that's what's going on. This is an art movement that happened, and I think it's something that is still happening today and that we're looking at. And we're sort of playing with the idea of media here and looking at things in different ways. This is an interactive piece by Namjoon Paik, who is one of my favorite artists. This is called Participation TV, and I think pieces like this are sort of the start. We're seeing people interacting with media, and we're seeing these intermedia aspects sort of come into a different way. And this was an installation in a gallery that allowed people to basically use sound and video to kind of create whatever they wanted to make and give that interactive element. But at the same time all of this was happening, there was also sort of the advent of electronic music. And we kind of had Bob Moog making the Moog synthesizers and things like that. And we had Wendy Carlos. I kind of like to think of Bob Moog as the engineer and Wendy Carlos as the artist, who sort of used all of these tools and instruments in different ways. And she created Switched on Bach, which was a very famous album, which kind of was the advent of electronic music. And sort of this happening and looking at electronic music and video allowed artists to create other things. Like this is a video piece using electronic music, videos, magnets, analog video processing and things to kind of manipulate the images in different ways and create something that is intermediate and something that's cool. And we can kind of see a lot of the same analogies to kind of stuff that's happening now and stuff that we're doing today. And this is by Namjoon Paik. It's in 1984. It's called All-Star Video. And yeah, he did a lot of work like this, just kind of playing with magnets on TVs and processing things differently and interacting with the art he was creating. But this kind of brings us back to the idea that Walter Benjamin also brought up in his book, Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. Basically, at that time, it was sort of the advent of film and the advent of photography, and it was kind of a response to painting. And it was basically saying painting by its nature cannot provide an object of simultaneous collective reception, as film is able to do today, and compare that to the idea that a public that would love slapstick comedy and things like that would look at surrealism in kind of not the same way and look at it as a little bit out there and have sort of a backwards attitude towards it. What movements like Dada and Fluxus challenged was the idea of art being owned by the elite, much the same way that film was doing in that time, and that art could be made by anyone and art could be enjoyed by anyone. And really it's just a bunch of people playing with toys and making cool stuff. And really, art is for everyone. Art can be enjoyed by everyone, and art can be loved by everyone. Here's a piece that was in 2011. It's kind of taking a lot of the same ideas of Fluxus and looking at it in a modern context. We have an interactive piece, we have intermedia, we have sound, we have this in a gallery, and it's painting. It's painting with interaction, it's painting with sound. Anyone can go up there and say things into it. Right now it's taking sort of the ideas of the room around it and painting what it hears. But interactive art isn't going anywhere, and it's not new. It's just using the tools of today to create things in the same vein that people were doing decades ago, or even at the beginning of the century. Which kind of brings us back to what we watched earlier with REPL Electric. In the same kind of way that Dada was playing with cameras, and Fluxus was looking at intermedia in different ways, and Namjoon Paik was playing with magnets and video processing. We have people now playing with code, and we have people playing with Clojure, and we have great libraries out there that allow us all to do these things. As I said earlier, Fluxus was a movement, and it sort of had this idea that Fluxus may not have happened yet, and it can still happen at any time, and any time can be the Fluxus movement. And I'm just really into the fact that there is a library out there called Fluxus that is used for making live coding, 3D art, performances, and installations, and things like that, which you can go out and start working on right now, whenever you want. All of these things are revolutionary art, and they were things that challenged the art world. And really, I would say that computer art and interactive art is revolutionary art. Because right now, we're doing the same thing. We're saying we can make art the way we want to make it, and we can make art with the tools we like and the tools we use, and we can use these tools in different ways. I always like to look at Dada and say, look at Twitter right now. Twitter is the new Dada. I mean, if you look at people shitposting, that's exactly what's going on. But we're actually in an age where anyone can make art. We have the tools. You can go out there and you can be a video artist. You can be a musician. You can do all of these things, and the art world isn't owned by a certain group of people. It's owned by everyone. So you can go use Overtone, you can use Quill, you can use Shader Tone, you can use whatever you like, and you can start making new things. So really, this and this aren't that different after all. But yeah, it looks like I have a bit of time, and I may have gone through slides a little quickly, but that was Fluxus to Functional. My name's Allison Carter. I'm on the internet. And if anyone has any questions, I can take some. Otherwise, I can hang out, and y'all can come talk to me about art and Overtone and whatever you'd like. But thanks.
I don't really have a specific question, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about repetition and generative art and how people find beauty and rhythm in terms of repetition, and
totally.
how that relates to what you were saying about improvement.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I like to look at repetition. Or one of my favorite ways to look at it is, I'm not sure if a lot of people are familiar with minimalist music, like Steve Reich or Philip Glass or things like that, or even a lot of droning electronic music. If you listen to it, you keep hearing the same thing over and over again, and while you're hearing it, you hear it change, and you hear different things happening with it, and that repetition is itself creating something new, even though it is the same thing over and over again, and it is really cool, and I am definitely into that. Yeah?
Quite hear the name of the artistic installation. There was the microphone that was creating the circular oscillating pattern.
Oh, that was Namjoon Paik. He was a Fluxus artist from Seoul, Korea, who moved to New York, and he was active for many decades.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yep.
This was great way of tying together different ideas and different things. I'm wondering if you have any ideas about how these kinds of observations about more artistic tools for live coding can generalize what we can take back to our day jobs using the REPL and Clojure as we do normally.
Yeah. I don't know. That's I'm not sure. That is a good way. That's a good sort of thing to think about. I don't know if I have anything particularly to say on that, but
It's fine. I don't have to have a day job, so it's fine.
yeah, totally. I mean, shouldn't we all just be paid to make art? I don't know. Yeah. Sure.
If someone's never made music on a computer before, how would you suggest starting?
I would say just listen to as much as possible and find stuff that you like, and kind of just embrace the fact that nothing is new and that anything you want to do has probably already been done, so just go with it and make whatever you want. But all right, great, thanks. I'm going to hang out here, and I'll probably be outside. If anyone wants to talk to me, come up, and thanks so much.